So on August 31st, 2020, at approximately 6 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I will have seen Tenet, directed by Christopher Nolan, starring John David Washington and Robert Pattinson, with a special appearance by Michael Caine. And it was definitely a Christopher Nolan movie, for better or worse. Tenet has been shrouded in mystery for the year or so since it was announced, a weight compounded by a parade of delays on account of COVID, until Unhinged finally broke the glass ceiling for new blockbusters to open back up in theaters. Or maybe it's just me, since I've been deliberately avoiding as much information about the project as possible. Credit where it's due, Nolan and his studio have been pretty consistently on point with their original projects about keeping their cards close to their chest on the nature of story beats and stuff, at least in the initial trailers. So I was really looking forward to riding that wave as far as I could. And sure enough, I had no idea what was going on for about the first 10-15 minutes of this, and I was loving it. So with that in mind, I'm going to generally discuss some pros and cons of the film before getting into increasingly more spoiler-heavy territory. Skip ahead as indicated if you're adverse to that at any point. First, while the story does get exponentially more complicated as it goes on, it's not as difficult to follow as I'd expected. To be sure, as characters pile on exposition and made-up sci-fi lingo to expand the world building, your head will be spinning to keep up, but this is by no means a primer-tier mind freak. Nolan's own temporally challenged penchant for casually plopping characters into new countries or inside secure facilities with little regard for how they got there intact is here, but care is always taken to establish the plan for a particular scene or set piece, however implausible it might be when you zoom out. Like most Nolan films, there's a lot of leaps in logic and gross implications which we apparently just have to take in stride, and raise more questions than answers once the credits have rolled and your actual brain starts working again. The film is almost video game-like in the procedural way that it staggers a series of missions, another parallel to the level and party-based member distribution of Inception, or the planet hopping in Interstellar. In a change of pace for Nolan, the score is done not by Hans Zimmer, but rather by a gentleman named, I believe, Ludwig Göransson. It has a more electronic feel to it. It's still pretty high intensity, and while that's befitting of the action sci-fi vibe and certain intense action scenes, it is distracting and a little bizarre on a couple of occasions, especially when it's in these relatively low-key dialogue exchanges and you've got these noises going on when people are just talking to each other. It's pretty much the Inception signature noise, but just at a higher pitch and run through a synth filter. Like the rest of Nolan's filmography, the movie has the same sterile, cold look from scene to scene. Once again, estranged parenthood is a plot point, and much emotional conversation is had about characters' loved ones who we barely even see, much less hear. Likewise, there's a techno-babble MacGuffin at the center of it all, with high stakes that we'll never concretely see the possible consequences of failure for. And I couldn't even remember most characters' names, which is why I'll be referring to them in broad terms. Visually, it's undeniably full of more of those simple but striking displays that stick in the mind long after viewing that, in my opinion, Nolan is great at. A soaring concert hall full of unconscious audience members, an ocean horizon dotted with wind turbines, an airplane slowly but irresistibly rolling across a parking lot, crushing cars in its wake. Another Nolan signature that detracts from the film's enjoyability is not being able to understand what the hell people are saying. We've got faces covered with gas masks, people talking over walkie-talkies, people hollering into headsets while sailing. I don't know who in this guy's life that audible dialogue hurt, but even at theatrical volume levels, I was having to perk my ears up on more than one occasion, and I know I'm not the only one. There's a part where JD Dub says some code phrase to identify a character. We live in a Twilight world. I thought he said we live in a toilet world. I heard some chatter beforehand about the film being humorless, but I gotta say I disagree. While I wouldn't call it outright joyful, J.D. Dub's character is a standout among Nolan protagonists. He gets in some good sly one-liners where I feel like the grief-stricken predecessors of DiCaprio and McConaughey would have been content to just mumble a wistful aside. Some choice lines include, "I'm not the man you send to negotiate, but I am the man people talk to." And to the villain's question of, "How would you like to die?" he responds, "Old." By the same token, though, he's a bit more of a blank slate background-wise, ironically losing a clear past in exchange for some solid quips, and there's still plenty of those classic Nolan duds in the dialogue. So let's get into some spoiler territory here. It's no secret that Christopher Nolan has a fascination with the concept of time, from the reverse chronology of Memento to the layered timelines of Inception and Interstellar, and even the way Dunkirk overlaps its parallel stories taking place across varying spans of combat. However, this is arguably the director's first out-and-out time travel movie. So the basic gist of the plot, which is revealed to JD Dub along with us, is this. It's been discovered that in the future, someone's using a special kind of radiation to make various objects reverse their entropy and travel backwards in time. This is not a quick jump, though. It's just an exact 1 second per second path through time. To us, it looks like effect preceding cause, but to the objects, it's just like being on the other side of the reflection. At one point, a character expositing this says, "Don't try to understand it, feel it," which, you got that right. It's believed that the use of this technology will allow bad guys to send nukes back in time or worse, so JD Dub's mission as a CIA operator given a new lease on life is to figure out who's making the stuff and stop them. Needless to say, the apocalyptic stakes carry over from Interstellar, but the film is definitely more aligned with Inception, albeit on a different axis. It could be argued that the two, separated by exactly a decade, are even companion pieces that would fit for an epically long double bill, with one exploring a heist through warped space and the other through warped time. Both slowly build the rules of the secret technology at the narrative's core as the events unfold, both being complicated in theory yet depicted fairly matter-of-factly, and reliant upon a surprisingly unassuming-looking device. In Inception, it's the gassy briefcase, and here a revolving door of a time style. Also, there's some silenced pistols that are just way too silent. Getting a little more specific here, one thing that's hard to ignore anymore is that Christopher Nolan has a strange fixation on relatively modest yet visually distinctive stunts involving vehicular damage. Like a somber take on Fast and Furious. We've got the semi doing a 180 in The Dark Knight, a car going off a bridge in Inception, plane disassembly in The Dark Knight Rises. Here he crashes a plane into a building, and later depicts the heist, which was executed by sandwiching a convoy on all sides of larger vehicles. I'm not sure what to make of this stylistically or metaphorically, except to say that it's definitely a budgetary flex, not the least because Nolan apparently determined that it was cheaper to crash an actual plane than to fake it with CGI or practical effects. I talked about the film having a welcome vein of levity running through it with the dialogue, but there's more than a few moments where it was funny and it probably didn't intend to be. These include JD Dub and Pattinson launching themselves onto a building with an ill-defined horizontal slingshot that looks like something that Wile E. Coyote would use to catch the Roadrunner, and, unfortunately, the fundamental appearance of the reverse time effects. Inception similarly got mileage out of repurposing exotic cityscapes as a dream world when peppered with a few dashes of impossible geometry, but here, the most ostensibly mind-bending scenes are pretty much just footage being played backwards. And sometimes it is pretty cool and fascinating, such as when our heroes are locked in a car chase with another vehicle that's going backwards in time, or when the reversed speech of an inverted foe is translated into intelligible English, when the crackle of glass fragments or rubble in a bullet hole foretells an impending gunshot. Other times, though, it just looks goofy. Like when a guy suddenly flies backwards like a mime on steroids. Others still, such as when one character and another who's been temporarily inverted tussle across a hallway, it's just plain confusing who's even doing what to who, even bearing in mind the story's contorted logic as to how this phenomenon works. I remember when I was a kid, we had a DVD player that would just, you could rewind a movie at the exact same frame rate, and I would get a laugh out of just playing movie scenes backwards. Who knew that all this time I was sitting on a potential goldmine of Hollywood special effects tech? Some press was made of the film having deceptively few FX shots, and for better or worse, this is probably why. And, unfortunately, the concept isn't even that distinctive. There's a whole cottage industry of disillusionment based around pointing out that Inception's conceit of entering people's dreams isn't original. But at least that film created its own iconic lexicon of how its specific dream logic operates, and basically invented an entire consistent profession which would function within that space. Here, if you've seen Doctor Strange, Looper, heck, even Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, or any number of the time travel movies that they rattle off in Avengers Endgame, you'll have an inkling of where certain hints will pay off, even if you're not exactly sure when the other shoe will drop. I'd be lying, though, if I said a couple of reveals didn't take me by total surprise, even as others felt more like vindication than revelation. It's a testament to cinematic sleight of hand that a film about time travel in 2020 can still shock. If I had to guess, the budget probably mostly went to pyrotechnics and shooting on location. This is a film that revels in its globetrotting, on par with a Bond flick, even if it isn't always crystal clear where the action's taking place. We hop from Ukraine to somewhere possibly Scandinavian, to Mumbai, to London, to Oslo, to Rome, I think, to what I think was just called North Europe. Now, one prominent actor that I didn't mention before is Kenneth Branagh, who plays the big bad, Andrei, a Russian arms dealer. Branagh is threatening enough in some scenes, but maybe it's just having grown up seeing him play Gilderoy Lockhart and then copying a Clouseau-grade French accent as Hercule Poirot in Murder on the Orient Express. But I had a hard time taking him seriously as a figure of menace, particularly when he secures the film's lone F-bomb by yelling about being a tiger on par with Charlie Sheen. Some stray thoughts. It's established at one point that when someone catches on fire while inverted, they actually freeze because the heat exchange is reversed. But then at the end of the movie, there's a bunch of explosions going off, and why couldn't they be ice blasts? That would have looked cool. How, practically speaking, is Andrei's threat to have his wife arrested for forgery or whatever really that much of a damning possibility coming from a lunatic oligarch? Why does she say that he prevents her from seeing their son when there's repeated scenes of her visiting him at his private school? And what exactly was the reason that J.D. Deb couldn't just bring Andrei's wife back through the same time style that she came in on to undo the bullets damage? Also, if future Andrei was on the boat at the climax, then what happened to the other version of him that didn't get slid off the deck? J.D. Dub also gets in a short but solid fight scene in the kitchen, which includes the use of a cheese grater as a weapon. There's a part where the guys have to rob a vault while holding their breath because it's filling with toxic gas, and I told myself I wasn't going to hold my breath along with them, but what the heck, it's some great free immersion. Besides, we all know you shouldn't be breathing too much in public these days anyway. The idea of reversed time being this dangerous, inhospitable alternate reality in and of itself, not unlike dreams in Inception or an exoplanet in Interstellar, is exciting. And attention is given to how this crew needs to make all their plans orally so as to not leave documentation that a time traveler could nab. However, aside from the first few moments where J.D. Deb's exposed to inverted time in the second act, following a bevy of safety precautions, not much comes of it, and he's just reverted into the past with another trip through a time style. Nevertheless, I did appreciate when the concept was explored to add delirious anxiety to a scene, putting us in the characters' shoes as they come to understand more about this strange and dangerous power, which culminates in the calculated execution of a temporal pincer movement, which makes so little sense and looks kind of dumb, but is really fun to think about. There's multiple parts where J.D. Dub refers to himself as the protagonist, and antagonist is used at least once for the bad guy. It's unclear to me if this is meant to be agency lingo or if it's just some meta self-backpatting from Nolan after Inception being a metaphor for filmmaking was too subtle for some people.
Hey, this is just Trevor from the future, clarifying that actually I looked it up after the fact, and apparently the main character's name is just the protagonist, which, my god, that's dumb. I don't really know what else to say, but good grief.
So if you try going to the bathroom while inverted. Also, rap music isn't traditionally what I associate with Christopher Nolan, and I will not forgive this man for ruining the SpongeBob halftime show at the Super Bowl the other year, but the Travis Scott theme for the movie does slap a little. Overall, I'd give this film a 7.5 out of 10. I do love that Nolan has the industry clout to make weird original films like this, but his trademark tics do hold back a good amount of storytelling and visuals from what I think is their full potential. Fortunately, the dialogue is some of Nolan's most upbeat, and the focus on relatively humble effects and grand, grounded locations is something to be lauded, even if not necessarily with a standing ovation. I definitely plan on seeing it again, in theaters or otherwise, to try and catch some things I missed, and to go in with the foreknowledge to add certain appropriate context to scenes. But of course, whether I go again, or you go for the first time, abide by the modern rules of cleanliness. I saw this at the mall theater for the first time in like half a year. Again, it was sparsely populated, and they're going for broke on the hygiene warnings. Although I did appreciate the fun movie posters they came up with to tie in. There's nothing I can say that hasn't already been said. If you don't feel safe, if you don't have somewhere to safely watch this movie, you don't have a clean mask, you don't have any hand sanitizer on you, stay home. It's the kind of movie that is definitely fun, definitely worth seeing on the big screen, but these are weird times, and if we could roll them backwards, that would be cool, but we can't. I'd recommend it. Just be smart about it.